And also another fun fact here, the testing of nuclear and mitochondrial DNA of Australian members of the genus Petroica suggests that the rose and pink robins are each other's closest relative within the genus. So this is, very surprising even to me, because I thought the rose robin was the pink robin. I think they were both the same thing, but, as I mentioned in one of the facts, it is kind of hard to distinguish some of the bird species, whereas other birds are very, very distinguishable. So it's very unpredictable. It's a lot of work when it comes to ornithology and distinguishing birds, especially because they are hard to research. But in this case, Hello everyone, good morning. I hope you're doing well today, and I hope your day is going great. If not, that is totally fine. Whatever time of day it is when you're hearing this podcast, I hope that it helps you relax, and I hope that it teaches you something. Welcome to the Early Bird Weekly Podcast, where we talk about birds. So I'm Ratiksha Satish Kumar, and in today's episode, we are going to be talking about the rose robin, or the pink robin. So last week, I know I posted an audio-only episode, and I explained the reason for it, but today I wanted to do a video episode after my bonus episode. So, I still have schoolwork, but I have learned to balance my school time with my personal and podcast recording time. So I hope to record every week regularly, whether it is an audio-only episode or a video episode. I'm trying to make all of it video episodes, but there will be some instances where I can only upload audio episodes because they're easier to edit. But leaving that off to the side, let's focus on the bird for today. So, we will look into some interesting facts about the rose robin and, sometimes go off track with what's happening outside my window. And so I've recently been seeing beautiful autumn sunrises almost every morning around, 6 a.m. or sometimes before that. It's really beautiful because the sunrise kind of falls in some parts of the trees. It kind of draws a line where the tops of the trees are, sunlit and with orange sunlight, and then the bottom of the trees, or from halfway, the trees are just normal color. So, it's kind of hard to explain something that beautiful, but it's an amazing sight. You guys should wake up early sometime just to see the sunrise. So, great way to start the day. But before we go into the episode, we are going to do some breathing exercises to help us focus and relax. So if you're ready, close your eyes, breathe in, and breathe out. Breathe in slowly, and breathe out. Last time, breathe in, and breathe out. Now you can keep your eyes closed or open them. Imagine a beautiful rainforest and you're walking along the moist path. Leaves are crunching beneath your feet. Suddenly, you spot something pink against the green forest background. So you inch closer, trying not to startle it. And as you move closer, the little rose-breasted creature becomes apparent to you. So I just like to add a fun little scenario in the beginning of my episodes, just to give some character to the bird that we're talking about. Let me know if you guys enjoy it or if I should take it out. I just thought it would be a good idea to kind of put the birds in a poetic stance. So going on to our actual facts of the rose robin. Before going into it, I want to say what I feel about the rose robin. It's a very tiny bird. I feel like, you know, even the most tiniest birds, even the most cutest, have amazing abilities that sometimes we might not notice or are overpowered by their cuteness or, you know, fluffiness. But as for the rose robin, they're amazing adapters. They adapt to their environment, especially with the rainforest. Sometimes the environment is unpredictable with rains, sunshine, and blah, blah, blah. So it is an unpredictable environment that they live in, and they are doing an amazing job adapting to whatever environment they live in. So they don't only live in rainforests. We'll see where they specifically live as we go on later in the episode. But yeah, the rose robin is an amazing creature, and it's also really cute to look at because it has like a very unusual appearance, but you know, it's a very pretty color. It has a pretty color of feathers. That's what I'm trying to say. So one thing that stood out when I first saw the rose robin was of course, their feather colors. They're pink, which is amazing, and I just wanted to, you know, bring them to light in this episode. Hey guys, I brought my little friend here with me. If you're watching the video, this is Mika, and she's amazing. She's not a slow sloth, I can tell you that. She's not slow, she's very fast, but she's gonna be here with me for the rest of the episode. But if you're not watching the video, she's basically a brown sloth with a white face and brown eyes and brown nose. Okay, now let's get into the facts of the rose robin. So the rose robin may be tiny, but it ranks high in terms of adaptation skills. That's what we talked about in the beginning of the episode. The rose robin, Petroica rosea, is a small passerine bird native to Australia. So last episode we saw I think the Pacific robin. It was also native to Australia. So I am guessing that Australia has a lot of robins. If you are a robin fan, you should definitely go visit Australia. And I'm sorry if my throat is a bit cracky today because, I don't know, yesterday I had a swim meet and usually we cheer for our fellow teammates, and you know, sometimes cheering gets my voice all messed up. But anyways, I'll just try my best to read all these facts here. Anyways, guys, let's get into our second fact here. They are sexually dimorphic, like most robins of the Petroisidae family. So the Petroisidae family mostly contains robins, and they're brightly colored. I think the Pacific robin from the last episode was from the Petroisidae family as well. But sexual dimorphism is a very cool thing. So what it actually means is that the male and the female have different characteristics. Sometimes it might be the colors, it might be the calls, I don't know, it might be the beak color, feather colors. It might be some kind of identification, even size. Size can be a factor when it comes to sexual dimorphism. It's a very cool thing. So in this case, the female is plain colored. So she's like pale gray-brown in the top and gray-white underneath. And she also has small white marks on the wings and over the bill. So, you know, this is the female being plain colored and the male having the pink feathers, which is really cool. I would think that it would be opposite because mostly is some of the times, at least in human culture, females are the ones who dress up a lot and males are most of the time plain. Not that I'm telling that's the way you should be or anything, but I'm just saying mostly. So in this case, the females are the ones who are simpletons and the males like to dress up in the case of rose robins. So the male has a distinctive pink breast and its upper parts are dark gray with white fronds. So the male has a pink breast and its tail is black with white tips, which is really, really cool because I haven't seen the tail of the pink robin yet, but I would definitely check it out and include a picture of that in this episode. So the underparts and shoulder are white. So this is a very unusual and unique kind of appearance. But something that fascinates me with birds or ornithology is the unique appearances of every bird. No bird looks, I can't say that no bird looks the same. There are some species that look the same, which kind of confuse scientists most of the time. But, for the most part, a lot of birds are super, super different from each other. And I think that's what makes them very interesting, at least to me. Let me know what interests you guys about birds. So, moving on, both robins, the male and the female, emit a tick call. I still don't know what a tick call is because, I tried searching it up, but the rose robin is not very researched. At least that's what I think, because I was trying to find, extra articles on them and maybe more in-depth kind of information on them, but I was out of luck. So I would conclude that the rose robin is not very well researched, but I included as many facts as I can in this episode. So I don't know what the tick call is, but I do know that the rose robin's song is a soft, sweet warble, often described as tseep, 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 or a gentle wee, wee, wee. Of course, I am not a bird call impersonator. I wish I was, but I would think that the rose robin's song is very relaxing. And if you guys want to listen to it, I have included a recording. Okay, so I hope that you guys enjoyed listening to that, but let's move on to another sound that the males make. So the male pink robins sing more frequently during breeding season, using their melodious calls to establish territory and attract mates. Not attack mates, attract mates. So we have seen in other episodes that birds have so many different ways of, courtship, attracting mates. And it's really, really amazing to see some birds dance, some birds have specific type of calls that they do. But all the time, it's just really different and really cool to see how these birds go about attracting mates. In this case, males they become singers and, they establish territory and use their melodious calls. As we saw, the rose robins come pre-packed with a singer voice that is really soft and melodious. So these males are using that to their advantage. Their calls are quieter compared to other robin species. So that's kind of nice to know there, because sometimes we might mistake some of the robin calls to be the pink robin's call. But now we can see that the pink robin is not very loud or dominant with their calls. So the pink robin is a very tiny bird. It measures from 11 centimeter to 13 centimeter, which is really, really tiny. And its wingspan is 18 centimeter to 22 centimeter. Because there are birds that are much tinier than the rose robin, such as the hummingbird, for instance, which is really tiny compared to the, rose robin. The wingspan of the rose robin is 18 centimeter to 22 centimeters. So the wings of the robin is much bigger than the length of the robin or the overall size. The robin weighs 7 grams to 10 grams, which is really low. But in bird species, it's really, really common to see really low weights or birds that weigh very, very less, because that's what helps them to fly and maneuver through trees or whatever adaptation they have. So, their low weight is a sign that evolution is doing its job. So getting into some geography here, the rose robin occurs in eastern and southeastern Australia. As we saw, the rose robin is endemic in Australia, and the word endemic means it's not found anywhere else. So you can see the map of the population. It's all, nothing's past Australia, all the red dots are kind of in the Australian side, but mostly they are found in eastern and southeastern Australia. They're particularly found in wet sclerophyll forests and rainforests. So sclerophyll forests are plant ecosystems that have evergreen broadleaf trees with sclerophyllous leaves which are hard and thick. So sclerophyllous leaves, they have the ability to withstand sunlight and drought conditions. So they're kind of found, I think, in arid conditions and all that. And also, they are in rainforests, of course. And we talked about the climate of the rainforests being unpredictable. And the rose robins know what to do when the kind of climate is kind of unpredictable months. So they kind of go into drier forest regions during the cooler months, and there is a reason behind it. This movement is a part of their seasonal altitudinal migration pattern. So I don't wish to abbreviate that term, not to complicate your lives, but let's just say it's just part of their habit that they do every season or every year. So let's just say they do this as part of their habit or have been doing this for a long time. Many birds have different migrational patterns, and it's really, really fun to learn about them. In particular, so if you want to learn about migration in particular, there are a lot of websites that you can see, but I must warn you that some of the migration patterns of birds are really hard to track. So you might not get what you're looking for, but at least you'll get an idea of how each birds differ in their seasonal migration patterns. So in this particular pattern for the rose robin, the individuals from higher elevation descend to lower altitudes or coastal areas to seek warmer conditions and more abundant food resources. So we can see the altitudinal part in this migration pattern. So, it's really cool to see how they kind of switch where the higher individuals or the individuals in higher elevations kind of come to the lower altitudes to find food and escape from cold conditions. So we know that the higher the altitude, the more colder the temperature is. And some birds are equipped or, have evolved to kind of adapt and survive cold climates, such as the Shima naga, which lives in Hokkaido year-long and has beautiful, amazing techniques to survive the winter. But in the case of the rose robin, it's more of kind of a tropical bird, so cold climates or winter is just not its thing. So, when evolution doesn't work, or if it does not have adaptations to survive the cold climate, it definitely knows what to do and where to go. So that's really amazing. So sometimes we might think that size often accounts to the amount of knowledge that an organism has, but I will tell you that that is totally false. And as most of you know, birds are amazing, intelligent creatures, even though they're really, really tiny. So just a cool thought there, something to think about. So this behavioral adaptation allows them to survive in changing environmental conditions. So as we saw in the beginning of the episode, this is one of their amazing adaptations. So, but in spite of their amazing adaptation skills, the rose robin is still vulnerable to clearing areas. So whenever areas are cleared, kind of like in deforestation or for building parks, urban areas, and whatever, these rose robin tend to disappear. So they don't become extinct, they just kind of vanish. As I told you before, sometimes it's hard to track birds because they like to be mysterious, especially birds like the owl and nocturnal birds. They are more mysterious than diurnal ones, but we can see here that the rose robin, is being a little mysterious and playing some tricks on us. But, it might also be that they're just kind of angry that we're clearing their trees and they don't want to see us anymore. That's how I like to think it. But anyways, the bird is especially sensitive to the loss of understory vegetation and habitat degradation. So this is the real reason behind why the rose robin kind of disappear. They are just really sensitive to the loss of understory vegetation or vegetation that's below the tallest of trees. And habitat degradation, as you guys know, is deforestation and just kind of the destruction of natural habitats for some animals and birds. So, sometimes this is inevitable. We humans do need a lot of land to build structures and so on. But, there are a lot of factors to consider regarding animals and birds and disruption of their livelihood or their lifestyle when it comes to clearing land or kind of interacting with the habitat of these organisms. Hey guys, so I know if you're watching the video, you might notice it got suddenly darker, but this is how I normally do my podcast with this kind of lighting, but I kind of forgot to turn off one of the lights, so let's just say I'm a little absent-minded. But anyways, let's move on instead of rambling on about the same thing. The population that's recorded in conservation areas such as the Dandenong Creek, Scotchman's Creek, and Gardiner's Creek corridors in Melbourne's eastern suburbs are higher, or a lot of population is kind of recorded in this kind of areas that are meant to conserve these rose robin. So the conservation efforts are focused on protecting and restoring native wet sclerophyll forests and rainforests, particularly in eastern Australia, where the species is more prevalent. So as we saw how important one habitat is to to a bird or an animal, these conservation efforts, I would believe, would have amazing effects on the population of the rose robin, because they are intent on saving something that is very, very essential to any organism, that is its habitat. So let's move on to some cool stuff. The rose robin actually feed on tops of the trees. So sometimes birds just pick an area of the tree where maybe their favorite insect is found, maybe their favorite fruit is found, but birds kind of pick this kind of place where they like to forage. As in the case of the rose robin, it's the top of the tree. So they eat insects, spiders, and mostly they catch them while they fly. So this is actually known as hawking, and I feel like there are amazing ways in which birds kind of feed. Some birds like to feed on the ground, which is called gleaning, kind of, picking around insects in the ground. And some birds, like the rose robin, like to feed when they fly. And also, I must include the kingfisher, of course, which is very unique. It likes to pounce on its prey, pounce in the water and, get prey or fish. So they often perch on low branches, making short sallies to catch prey mid-air or glean them from foliage. So as I said, gleaning is kind of picking out insects, so they might go to the ground and pick out insects from the ground, or in this case of the rose robins, it's mostly in the top of the trees. So these rose robins are not ground feeders. I just generalized what gleaning is. I generally just explained it. But the rose robins, they don't really go to the ground. But let's move on to the next fact. So this is about the breeding season of the rose robin. So during the breeding season, males become territorial, defending their areas with melodious songs and displays. So we can see that some of the birds in the previous episodes as well are territorial. One of the reasons is because of their nature. So some birds just like to keep their own territory and be private, such as the Canada jay, building nests. And in this case of the rose robin, I don't actually know why they're territorial. It might be to attract mates. Some of the females like males or prefer males that have a territory and see them as more stable. So, the males do an amazing job defending their areas with their melodious songs and displays. So this is really unique, where the rose robin kind of uses its melodious song for different purposes and to defend their territory. Another cool fact that I learned about the rose robin is that it does not return to the same branch while foraging. So they kind of like to, go around, get whatever they can, and then not return to the branches and keep going to new different ones, which is really cool. Some of their prey are wasps, bugs, cicadas, caterpillars, cinch bugs, beetles, etc. So we can see how these birds prefer a variety of insects. So the breeding season is from September to January, where 1 or 2 broods are raised within that time span. So it's, fall or autumn to winter season that the birds prefer to breed. So the nests of these birds is a neat and deep kind of cup shape, and these birds use bits of moss and fern to kind of build these nests, and they use spider webs, feather, and fur to bind or fill up the nest space, and also they use lichen for their exterior, which is really cool but common in other bird nests as well. So we can see, based on all of the nest descriptions of the previous birds, we can conclude that these birds love stealing spider webs. So they kind of place their nest in the fork of a large tree, mostly 30 to 66 feet above ground, or 10 to 20 meters above ground, if you like using meters. So we saw in the Shima Inaga episode that birds kind of prefer keeping their nests higher or lower, and this is because they know where their predators are. So if their predators are kind of hawks or birds that like to fly high, then I would assume that the bird would build its nest lower, or vice versa. So, this is also a form of adaptation for the rose robin and for many other birds. So the rose robin lays 2 or 3 dull white eggs that is speckled with bluish, grayish, or brownish spots. So the egg is really, really tiny. It's only 17 into 13 millimeters, which is really, really tiny. So the incubation lasts about 14 days or 2 weeks and is primarily done by the female. We can compare this to other birds. Some of the birds that we covered, both the male and the female help raise the chick or incubate the chick. And in some of the birds, it's mostly the male, mostly the female. So it's really, really different. And we can see how the social roles of each gender is in the case of birds. So, both parents feed the nestlings. Only the incubation is done mostly by the female. But when feeding the nestlings, it's done by both. So the nestlings fledge after approximately 14 days, but remain dependent on adults for several weeks. So in the previous episodes, we also learned about altricial and precocial birds. So altricial birds are birds that are dependent on their parents for at least some early kind of years or days of their survival. And precocial birds are birds that are not dependent on their parents when they hatch. So they're hatched with eyesight, feathers. Mostly the precocial birds are very independent. So in this case, the rose robin nestlings are altricial. I would say that most of the nestlings of birds are altricial. At least the birds that we have covered in this episode, most of the nestlings of them are altricial. So, after 2 weeks, just 2 weeks, the nestlings kind of become independent. So cool things there. The nest of the, rose robin is actually parasitized by pallid cuckoos, the brush cuckoo, and the Horsfield's bronze cuckoo. So parasitizing nests is basically, some of the birds, mostly the cuckoos, they don't like to build their own nest. They like to kind of sneak in their eggs with other birds' nests so that the other bird would not think that it's a cuckoo's egg and think that it's its own egg, and kind of raise the cuckoo chick along with its own chicks. And now all of the energy, that is spent with finding food, with feeding and everything, it goes to the cuckoo chick as well. Sometimes birds have to do what they have to do to survive. So the main predators of the rose robin include snakes, cats, birds of prey such as goshawks, and owls. So owls especially like to eat small birds. That's, a very bizarre fact, but some birds like to eat other birds. The lifespan of the rose robin is 4 years. So it lives typically for 3 to 5 years in the wild. The longest recorded lifespan of a rose robin is 6.1 years, which is much longer than its lifespan. That's really great to see. So like all birds, lifespan can be affected, by factors such as predation, habitat quality, disease, and access to food resources. So these rose robin are listed as least concern in the IUCN Red List, which is an amazing thing because we don't really need to worry about these birds. But their survival is also impacted by climate change, which can shift its habitat ranges, which means we don't really need to worry about their population. But that also can be misleading sometimes. We have seen in the case of the Shima Naga, where they had these kind of silent threats that was masked by their least concerned phrase or their listing. So it's always nice to consider these birds as a precious kind of thing in the earth, and a kind of, even if they're least concerned or endangered, treat them the same way. So the rose robin survival is also, so in the case of the rose robin, it does not have silent threats, but we should still know that some of the factors that impact their survival or population. So the rose robin survival is also impacted by climate change, which can shift its habitat ranges. We saw that climate in the rainforest especially is really, really unpredictable, and climate change makes it even more, which means the rose robin might fly to other places if the climate is kind of really unpredictable and hard to adapt to. So, and another factor that is a threat or population threat for the rose robin is, of course, predation. But in this case, it's predation from introduced species, such as cats. So introduced species is when a new species or animal or bird is introduced to that area that was once not there or is new. And so this kind of messes up the bird. It's not adapted to getting away from cats. It's kind of a new thing that happens to a lot of organisms, unfortunately. So, there's a lot of stories and histories where birds or animals have gone extinct because of introduced species. So they're not really a good thing, but sometimes they might be good things. They might, adapt together, work out stuff. So lastly, I think let's move on to some etymology. Etymology is the study of names and their origins. Like all Australian robins, the rose robin is not closely related to either the European robin or the American robin, but it belongs rather to the Corvida parvorter, comprising many tropical and Australian passerines, including pardalotes, fairy wrens, and honey eaters, as well as crows, not closely related to the Europeans or the American robin. So these are all birds that come under the subspecies of Corvida parvorter, or rose robin belongs to that as well. So it going a little more deeper into their scientific name, Petroica. So the Australian birds under this genus are known as red robins colloquially. So they're kind of distinct, or they differ from the yellow robins of the genus Ipsaltria. So under the family of Petroisidae, there is a genus called Petroica and Ipsaltria, and I think there are more genuses, I'm not sure. But these are two genus that come under the family Petroisidae, and our rose robin belongs to the Petroica genus, and it's classified as a red robin. So these are all very scientific stuff. You don't need to pay attention to it if you don't want to. This is just some, nerdy bird stuff Anyways, let's move on to how its name was actually created. So it was first described by ornithologist John Gould in 1840 with its specific epithet derived from the Latin roseus, or pink. So rosebird. So it kind of makes sense that, a rose-breasted bird is called named roseus. Roseus in Latin means pink. So, it's just common logic. Scientists could test the nuclear and mitochondrial DNA of the birds under the genus Petroica, and they have found that the, rose robin and the pink robin are the closest relatives, but they're different birds. So, some of the bird watching tips that I came across. Let's say you went to Australia and you want to see the rose robin. I do have some bird watching tips for you. The first tip is to look for flashes of pink in the mid to lower canopy of wet forests. The second tip is to listen for their soft, sweet, warbling song, especially during the breeding season. The third tip is to observe their characteristic pounce and turn feeding behavior. In Australia, so that is, we saw how these birds hunt. So pounce and return is, just another word for hawking or catching prey while flying. So the bird will catch prey, fly out, catch prey, and then return to its branch. And in this case, it likes to switch branches. So moving on to some facts here. This is the last thing I'm going to be covering in this episode. The rose robins are one of the smallest robin species in Australia. Their pink coloration comes from the carotenoid pigments in their diet. So, carotenoids are something that are present in some of the insects. So when the birds kind of prey on insects or hunt insects, they are ingesting this pigment as well. And that kind of shows up on their feathers, which is really, really cool and kind of reminds us that we are what we eat. So this is amazing because this is kind of present in flamingos as well. And I was really excited to learn about it. It's such a cool thing. So these birds often join mixed species feeding flocks outside of the breeding season. So they kind of mix with other species, which is something that I've not paid attention to because I just treat it as a fact that, birds just join mixed species flocks to feed and everything. It is a normal thing, but it's really, really cool because interactions, it shows us how much it's important in the wild. So that brings us to the end of this early bird episode. So, really cool bird here that we learned about. I'm really happy that I'm back to recording video episodes because I did miss it a lot. I would be doing my homework and kind of thinking about, how much I loved recording episodes and editing them and posting them. But, when it comes to prioritizing my tasks, my schoolwork is the priority. So I hope to record more episodes like this in the future. And, if I balance out my time and, complete my homework as fast as I can definitely make more episodes for you guys. So thank you so much for listening. That brings us to the end of this early bird episode. And, I hope you enjoyed learning about the rose robin. So, tune into my episode next week when we'll be chatting about another cool bird. And don't forget to follow this podcast on social media. If you would like to message me on Instagram, the username is early_bird_weekly_podcast. Or if you'd like to send me an email, you can send it to earlybirdweeklypodcast@gmail.com. So feel free to ask any questions or give feedback. I'm open to any suggestions for future episodes as well. As you saw in the bonus episode, one of my listeners got a chance to do an episode with me, and it was one of their requested episodes, which is really, really cool. So yeah, if you liked this episode about the rose robin, you can share this to your family and friends. That's always really, really helpful. It helps me get a wide range of audience, and it helps other people relax and learn about birds. So if you don't want to do that, then feel free to leave a review or a rating on Apple Podcasts, and a rating on Spotify. Thank you so much for listening, guys, and see you in the next episode. Goodbye. Goodbye.